And Khadija, I'm just gonna spotlight you. So we've just had a very rich discussion of the book. Lots to say and think about, but we had a few questions that came up that we thought maybe we'd address directly to you. And maybe I'll just start with the one that was most recently brought up. We were curious about the character of Omar, and he's sort of, maybe I'll, sorry, I'll come onto the screen. Hi, I'm Meg. We didn't get to formally meet. It seems to me that by the end of the book, we have Almasi as a kind of force for good, a kind of good spirit, and he enables Aisha's journey at the end of the book. But what holds me back from seeing him as a purely good character is this kind of slavery of Omar. I don't know. I think of him as like his you know, he's entrapped in some way in his lair. So I'm just curious about that character. We just get these kind of little whiffs of him in these few little spots in the book.
Okay. Hi, Meg, and hi, everyone. So Omar did something very rude, which was to invite himself into someone's house. And I guess the punishment for that rudeness was being taken on as, it seems like a servant's task, but it's almost like an apprentice task. It's a role that Zubair had when he was younger. Yeah, so Almasi is not a very good person. I think to me he represents the idea of Mombasa and playing nice or playing ignorant, and trying to forget a fiercer history in order to keep the peace. And so the novel ends with him kind of waking up and the rest of Mombasa waking up with him, you know, being galvanized and being more active. So Almasi represents the old Mombasa that has been forcibly that he's encouraged everyone to forget, or we are encouraged to forget, and that we must remember, I guess, if that makes any sense.
Oh, that's actually really helpful. Maybe to sort of back up to a more general question, there was a question that came up in the group about the title, about House of Rest, which we sort of get told, I think, that it's more of a riddle than an actual place, but we weren't sure, and we'd love to hear you talk about it.
Okay, initially I was like, it doesn't really matter if it's a real place or it's a riddle or it's you know, like a metaphor. But to me, it was a real place. Before I wrote the book, I wrote a poem called Hajar in the House of Rust. And the House of Rust is meant to be, so it's an actual place. It's an actual place where like scholars like Hamza come from. It's a place of knowledge, but also at the same time, it serves as a metaphor, because you have, in coast areas, we have metal grills on the windows, and you always have to take care of them, especially when you're next to the sea. They turn to rust all the time. So the rust is about being inactive, being passive. So on that side, it's kind of like a metaphor for Mombasa, but at the same time, there's an actual, like, real intended House of Rust. And when I was first writing the book, I had intended on writing about the actual House of Rust. And then I realized that that wasn't as important. It would drag the book even more. What was important was the protagonist taking initiative and going on the journey.
it hadn't occurred to me to think of the House of Rust as a metaphor for Mombasa. I love that. Does anyone else in the room want to jump in and ask a direct question? We have some other things we talked about that I could continue, but raise your hand if you'd like to ask one.
Hi, Meg, I can ask.
Yeah.
Hey, Khadija, nice to meet you. We've had some emails. Really, I've just loved reading the book, and I just shocked at how beautifully written this book is. I'm not shocked, but I'm in awe. And I guess I wanted to ask you only because I don't know very much. I know there is this, I've read that this is one of the first books about Hadhrami folklore and Hadhrami culture. And it's not something I'm able to seek or understand. So I just wanted to know your inspiration, or if that is true. What does it mean when it says this is a book about Hadhrami folklore?
This is a bit difficult because there's not much folklore that I do know about the Hadhrami community as it exists in Yemen. I know more about the culture here as
Right.
it's developed in the Swahili community and how it's been touched by the Swahili community. And there isn't much folklore. I think there's only like 2 actual myths that I actually properly kind of reference, which is the first is the hooved buibui woman, which is a woman who accosts who strangers at night will see if they're late to take a ride back home in Mombasa.
Oh.
And she's supposed to be very frightening. And then what's it called? Nunda, eater of men, which is the beast from the Swahili story about the prince who was sent off by his father to find this beast that was eating people and that was eating the fruit from a tree or something. It's in a collection of stories by Edward Spear. I think he had translated them. So I don't have access, and I didn't have access to a lot of the actual proper written mythologies and written folklore. So I just decided to kind of invent my own, I guess. But the inspiration, the sentiments and mannerisms, the values are drawn from a distinctly Swahili Mombasa community. So where Hadhrami starts and where Hadhrami ends and Swahili starts is a very blurred kind of thing. It's not black or white. It's the identity is much more complex than that, I guess. And so as when we're talking about the book, we mentioned Hadhrami and Swahili culture, in the back of the description. But to me, they're kind of merged, and sometimes it's hard to tell them apart.
Yeah. I mean, it does say diaspora, so it's been clarified in that word. But yes, I think Nilofer had a question.
Nilofer, did you want to ask?
Sure. Hi, Khadija. My question, I guess, is building a little bit off what Bhakti asked. So I'm thinking about Hababa Hadia, who seems to be one of the figures through which a more direct connection to Hadramut seems to come about. And, in that section, I think it's chapter 6 or something, it really the tension or friction really focalizes around marriage and ideas of race and difference. And I wonder if you would just talk a little bit about that, because I'm really taken with how you were just talking about how Hadhrami and Swahili culture are blurred. And sometimes people seem to find a really optimistic, feel good quality in that, but I'm also sensing some important friction. So I wonder if you would talk about that a little bit. Thank you.
I see, yeah. Hi. I didn't say hi to Bhakti when she talked. Hi, Bhakti, sorry, I didn't say hi to you. And hi, Nilofer, yeah? Okay, so yeah, I said the cultures kind of merge, but there are points of tension. There's issues of colorism, there's issues of class, there's issues of gender. For example, girls growing up, you're generally told the way you hold yourself is going to affect your prospects. How light you are or how dark you are is going to affect your prospects. What family you come from and your family name is going to affect your prospects. How pure you are, like if you're purely Hadhrami, as people like a character like Hababa Hadia would say, then you'd have a bigger likelihood of like marrying someone who's purely Hadhrami, or you're connected more to the homeland or to that culture, which is very funny because when Hadhrami merchants came to Mombasa, they didn't bring their wives. They married into here. So it's very strange to have this kind of like idea of like almost racial purity that's not really talked about, but at the same time, your culture is so like physically interwoven like with the local culture that it feels ridiculous to have these airs. But yeah, so someone like Hadia, she's not an evil person. I think she's just a ignorant person, I guess. And so yeah, traditional, but like some of these issues of race and these tensions, we pretend they don't exist, or that because we're Muslims and we're all Muslims, we're all together, we're all practicing Islam, we all believe in God, but there are differences. So I wanted to highlight those tensions because Hababa and Aisha are more on the outside of the family because of the proximity to like actual like Swahili culture. They're more Swahili and more visibly Swahili than the inner core of the family. And yeah, like it's I don't know how to describe it. I'm not very good at describing it, but yeah, there are those tensions, and I kind of wanted to highlight that because of Aisha's mother's reputation. Also, reputation is a huge thing. So it doesn't matter how well Hababa or Aisha try to hold themselves, or how if Shida was a good girl, everyone's gonna remember the fact that your grandmother was running around, and it's always going to affect your prospects. So it's unforgiving, I guess. Sometimes it's strange, at one point like everything feels like very united, and like you said, like it's nostalgic or like sentimental, I think is the word, right? And but at the same time there's like some serious issues that we kind of need to work on as a community. Oh yeah, wait, sorry. And because of another thing, the communities here, like example, the Hadhrami communities and the other like Omani Arab communities, very few of them will accept being called Swahili, because there's ethnic Swahili, like the indigenous Swahili people, and then there are people who grew up in the Swahili culture. So you're both Swahili, obviously one is indigenous, but they won't accept that they're less Arab, if that makes any sense. They won't accept that they're Swahili or that their culture is Swahili. So yeah, it's very weird, and I'm kind of still working through that tension now. I don't have precisely the language for it. I'm still learning more about it, but I felt like I needed to highlight it specifically in this book because considering that Hababa and Aisha are living in a poorer part of town, why are they living there? Why are they having such a tough time, etc.? And it's tied into those issues of like how much the community considers you part of them, I guess. Yeah.
Patrick, did you want to ask your question out loud?
Well, sure. I don't know if this is part of the tensions that you were speaking. And by the way, hello and thank you. there's a part where Hababa says Mombe rather than Ngombe. And I'm just wondering if that's some of these differences are marked in language. And I have to say that the goats were one of my favorite parts of the book. And you've also delighted me because I'll say one thing. My very first cat who came from Malindi was named Nunda.
Oh, that's so clever. Okay, hi Patrick, and
Hello.
I'm so pleased you noticed the Mombe thing. Because some of the communities which are here, the Swahili that they speak is not exactly the correct Swahili. So it's proper Swahili, and it's a word I struggle with even. It's a ngombe, right? Or I'm not really sure. I can't say it. I've been made fun of. But like I hear the older women, they can't say it either. They say mombe. So Hababa says it incorrectly. Yeah, and I think Zubair corrects her. I'm not sure. I don't
Yes.
remember.
But I've been
He does
reading a lot
correct
of.
her.
He does, yeah.
Okay.
He does correct her, yeah. And I don't know what the second part of the question was.
Well, I'm just wondering if that is a feature of the community, that there's accented differences.
Yeah, you know how like different communities would speak English a bit differently, with their own like kind of mixed with their own dialects, or with their own little things, and being unable to pronounce some words would be one of those things. But also at the same time, I know the older women in my family speak many languages. They speak Swahili or Kamba, and English they don't speak, and Arabic. And it's something that was one of the strengths of my community, is their ability to kind of assimilate into a culture to the point of like being able to pick up the local languages. But at the same time, they still have those struggles, I think, with speaking, and it becomes almost like its own kind of, not dialect, but its own kind of what is the English? There's a different way of speaking in each family.
Yeah, it's a little identity marker almost. Thank you.
Yeah.
Khadija, there was a mention in the chat from Bhakti about your literary influences, and that's actually something that came up a bit in our conversations. I know that Yvonne Awar's book Dragonfly Sea was mentioned, and we were thinking about whether there's an affinity between these books and their young female protagonists. And there were also a couple of other things mentioned. I was thinking about the Swahili poem, the 19th century poem Alinki Shafi, in terms of the ruin, Almasi's ruin, that is also a beautiful hotel, that it kind of exists in both these states at once, made me think of that poem. But I would love to hear about who your influences are in writing this.
Influence is something very hard to talk about, but at the same time, I don't consider them influences, but they're things that I enjoyed reading that showed me what could be done with words and language. One of those books was Deathless by Catherine M. Valente. Another one was, what was the other one? Also, I read a lot of poetry, so a lot of poetry by these old English poets like John Keats, and what else? A lot of, actually, not necessarily writing, but the old Swahili proverbs, like kind of, yeah. My other influences would be what? I'm trying to remember. When I was writing the second half of the book, Edward Steer's Swahili Tales really came in handy because that was one of the few resources I had. And you know, I'm kind of envious of you because I came awake into reading very much later. So like I haven't read a lot of the actual like Swahili and local poetry. I've read some poetry by Abdalla, but I haven't really dipped into, you know, the whole wealth of like the mashairi and everything. So that's something I'm still doing and something I'm looking forward to doing. And actually, I want to link to that poem that you're talking about. I feel like I read it because I remember doing research to that extent. Oh, wait, the other inspiration, strangely enough, I think will be Hannibal. And so much of these, or you know, other poetry by like, you know, people like Richard Sicken and some other guys, because it introduced this idea of love as almost being cannibalism somehow. And I was very interested in that idea, in the give and take of love, in the way that, and how we may unknowingly be betraying ourselves, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I love poetry. I can't remember all the names, but those are some of the names I remember. That kind of just made me think about these things differently. And Catherine M. Valente's book, Deathless, was important to me because it was so distinctly Russian. It was like everything in that book is like Russian. And I was like, why can't I write something that is distinctly Mombasa? And why haven't I read something like that in English, you know, at least? So it really invigorated me, or like inspired me to like actually go for that, to be unapologetically like Mombasa inspired. Everything should be about Mombasa. Yeah, in the book.
I love that you were reading love poetry. I mean, we were talking about how beautifully the relationships in the book are written, between Aisha and her grandmother, and between the older couple, Mzee Zuberi and Hababa is just so written so in such a lovely way.
Thank you. I wanted a love story for the older people because I realized in Mombasa, if you lose your husband early, likely you will never marry again. As in the women are like, oh, I have children, I don't need to marry again, I'll just move on. But I've always thought, like, why should love end there? You know, you can still get married at 30, 40, 70, 80, you can still find love. And I think that marrying for love and just for companionship is something people are too shy to admit that they want. So it was important for me, if there was going to be a love story, that Hababa and Zubair got their love story in the end. Yeah.
I love that. Any final questions? Constance, I know you had a few that came up in our discussion. I don't know if you want to, I know you can't turn on your camera because of connection issues.
I just wanted to express to Khadija that I enjoy the book a lot. I didn't always understand it, you know, and but I really, really liked it. I'm going to reread it and go over it carefully. So thanks so much for putting that out there.
Thank you so much. Yeah, a lot of people in my family also didn't understand it, so it's all right. It's okay. Yeah, thank you though. That's so kind.
Okay.
Hey, Khadija. Yeah, hi. I just wanted to know, I don't know what we're calling this genre: surrealism, magic realism, speculative fiction. You know, I'm a literary critic, so I just have to think in these categories all the time. But this is your thing. So what's your next? Is your next book like this?
Yeah, I think so. I think my next book is pretty much going to be the same vibe, the same idea of, things just being accepted as real in that world. Because it's interesting to be writing from a belief system like mine, where of course these things are a bit fantastic, but there is a possibility of them happening. There is crows do communicate with each other. They do pray. They are unseen beings who meddle sometimes, and there are monsters in the sea. And I really enjoy being able to kind of write from that Muslim and coastal, like Swahili, Hadhrami, whatever Indian Ocean perspective, and being able to work in belief and also those fantastical elements of belief and write about wonder and horror at the same time.
But I am right to think that there is also some motivation to, like, there's definitely a thread kind of against marriage, maybe, or something like that in the book. Like there's some attempt to find different ways to love and relate to each other in the community that's not the traditional. You have some kind of interest in that too, right?
Yeah, because I think the Muslim perspective, especially someone like Hamza comes from, is a lot more flexible. It depends on, not inheriting belief, but figuring out what you believe. So I think that idea of spirituality, like you don't have to be Muslim to enjoy this book, and it's not a Muslim book. It's not like, this is not a religious text. It's not encouraging anyone to become a Muslim, but if you want to, go ahead. But I think I wanted to bring that idea that Islam, at the end of the day, is supposed to be a forgiving religion, and what matters at the end of the day is coming upon belief on your own terms and kind of figuring out for yourself what you want, whether that is belief in God, the belief in other things, in your goals, etc. And it's things should not be so rigid. Is it rigid? The word is rigid. Yeah,
of course. No, it's great. I have one quick biographical thing for you. You are writing so much about the ocean and the sea. So can I assume that you have a lot of experience, like being in the ocean and experiencing all those temperatures and like being able to navigate?
Oh no, I can't navigate. I cannot. I can't at all. And
that's why Aisha can. She's your. She can.
I actually got a book on sailing to read about sailing in the secondhand store, and I realized the boat doesn't have sails. So what's the point? She just needs to row. That's because it's just a rowing. That made things easier for me. So essentially, making the boat some kind of magical artifact was also about convenience for me. But in the second half of the book, I did like a lot more research in terms of like, in the idea of the unlucky sailboat and like what it should look like and what's important about learning how to drive it. But I'm next to the sea for most of my life. I'm always near the sea. But I've always had a healthy respect and a healthy fear of the sea.
Yeah.
I love it very much, but I don't go swimming in it, willy-nilly. Is it called willy-nilly? The English word. I don't go swimming in it recklessly. But I have experienced extreme temperatures in other situations,
You're like every single member of my Indian family. It's like we love the ocean, but don't set your foot in it. You have to fear it.
Exactly. And by the way, to come back to your question about belief, or we were talking about belief. I wanted to highlight the fact that Mombasa is a place full of many different beliefs. Like you have the seamstress who gives the offerings for the crow, which is in I think you know more about this, but it's supposed to be honoring your ancestors, or like your ancestors are communicating as, according to the seamstress. And I wanted to highlight the fact that, you know, that there are many different religions in Mombasa, and there are many different ways of believing and kind of existing with one another. Yeah.
Thank you, Khadija. Meg, do you want to say a final word?
Sure. Sorry, I'm slow at doing this, the Zoom stuff at the same time that I'm talking. I do want to sneak in one more question, because I was just thinking, as you were talking about the, particularly about Almasi in some way as symbolic of Mombasa and the need to sort of wake up out of a sleepiness or, you know, inaction. And I wondered if is there a political side to that? Is there a politics to that about about Mombasa's role in modern Kenya? And maybe I would just add to that the possibility that, because it seems like maybe the feminism in this book suggests, you know, that the female protagonist suggests that it has to be it has to be the women, or the woman who wakes it up. You know, the movement has to come from that place. So I'm just curious if you have any word on that.
Well, politically, I stay away from politics because I get very angry when it comes to politics. So I just kind of like take a step back from that. But in terms of like Mombasa and the coast in general is very underfunded. It's very underdeveloped. And it's very strange to me that it's been over so many decades that this region can still be, you know, such a huge tourist destination, but also it's not doing as well as it should. People make fun of, like, you know, when exam results come around, about how badly people on the coast do because they're lazy or they're stupid. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, they don't have access to the same resources. You know, they're unfunded, and you know, it's more complicated than that. So with Almasi, it's that two sides of Mombasa. With the hotel is very beautiful, very inviting. So there's that side of Mombasa that's all about hospitality, because I feel like coastal areas are very welcoming, and the way our communities are structured, like it doesn't matter your race, your gender, whatever. If you come from the coast, there's a shared kind of idea of like what you should give your guests. And people enjoy Mombasa as a weekend destination. So there's almost this kind of like disregard and disrespect towards the coast, but also a kind of like people are willing to go there and have their fun and then leave. What was I saying? And also at the same time, there are all these horror stories about Mombasa. Like anyone who comes to Mombasa like has a fear of jinns or a fear of all these things. I personally am not scared of any of those things, and locals are not scared of any of those things. But like, you know, these stories are so wild. So Almasi is those two ideas of Mombasa: the hospitality, but also at the same time the teeth beneath that hospitality. Because at the end of the day, people are choosing to be kind. People are choosing to be hospitable. So don't take advantage of that, especially with Mombasa's very violent history, with the wars it survived, the importance of it as a trade center, like a port. As in, don't look down on people from Mombasa as just people who are there to, you know, serve your needs. You know, whenever you need to take a break from the city, like you need to respect the people who come from there. Yeah. So I guess that was my idea. I guess I felt like the idea towards Mombasa and towards the coast in general has always been very patronizing. So yeah, I wanted the book to say we're aware of that, and we're nice because we choose to be nice, I guess. Yeah.
Mm. Well, that seems like a good note to end on. You've been very generous with your time. Thank you so much for being with us and answering all of our questions, and for your beautiful book. And we'll be waiting for what's next. I think we're all excited. There were, murmurs in the chat of excitement about, what else we might get to read from you in the future.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed all your questions, and I'm really happy you guys did a book club on my book. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right?
Thank you.
Bye.
Shukuru sana.
Karibu.
Asante.
Bye.
Bye-bye.